I never thought that one night out would unravel everything I thought I knew about trust. My name is Darien Kestrel, and I've always prided myself on seeing the world with clear eyes. I had a good life, a respectable job, and a marriage that, at least from my perspective, was built on mutual respect and understanding. But that night at Club Zyr, a venue known for its eclectic mix of art, music, and questionable decisions, changed everything. It started as a routine visit. My wife, Marlo, insisted we go out for a change of pace. She argued that life was too short to be confined within our own safe little bubble. I was reluctant, partly because I didn't particularly care for the loud, neon chaos of a nightclub, and partly because I sensed that Marlo's recent insistence on trying something new hinted at something deeper I wasn't ready to face. Nonetheless, I agreed, wanting to keep the peace and hoping for a pleasant evening. Club Zyr was a labyrinth of smoky corridors, pulsing lights, and an eclectic crowd that thrived on the night's energy. I wasn't particularly comfortable there, but I let myself relax as I took in the surreal ambience. My eyes eventually landed on a familiar figure. It was my longtime friend, Quillen Maddox, a man I had known since college. Quillen was never one for subtlety. He had a magnetic personality and a tendency to stir things up wherever he went. I felt a pang of nostalgia as I saw him laughing with a group of strangers near the bar. I greeted him with a cautious smile, trying to mask the unease that had started creeping in. "Quillen, it's been a while," I said, extending a hand. He clapped me on the shoulder with a warmth that felt genuine at first, but there was something almost predatory in his eyes, a glint that I couldn't quite place. "Darien, I'm surprised to see you here," Quillen replied, his voice booming over the music. "I didn't know you'd ever stray from your office routine." I managed a laugh that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Maybe I needed a break," I said. I then spotted Marlo, dressed in a way that accentuated her confidence and charm. She was laughing with a group of people near the dance floor. My heart gave a subtle twist, an inexplicable mix of admiration and foreboding. I tried to shake it off, thinking it was merely a case of jealousy over an innocent night out. As the evening progressed, I found myself drifting between conversations with Quillen and half listening to the pulsing music. I kept an eye on Marlo, and something felt off. Every time she laughed or touched someone's arm, I would catch myself wondering if there was more to it. There was a subtle intimacy in the way she interacted with certain people, an energy that I couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't until much later that the pieces began to fit together. At one point, Quillen insisted we grab a drink in a quieter corner of the club. "There's something I need to tell you, Darien," he said, lowering his voice as he leaned against a dimly lit pillar. I was curious but also wary. After all, Quillen had a reputation for embellishing stories for his own amusement. "I've seen Marlo a few times tonight," he began, his tone casual yet laced with an intensity that made me pause. "But not just seeing her. I mean, I saw her laughing, whispering, and sharing looks with someone. Not me." His words hit me like a slow drip of poison that I frowned, trying to keep my voice level. "What are you getting at, Quillen?" He hesitated, as if weighing the consequences of speaking the truth. "I think I know who it was." His eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a chill despite the club's warmth. It was Damon Frost. I had heard of Damon, a name that, until that moment, had been nothing more than background noise in the web of mutual acquaintances. But something about the way Quillen said it, with a mix of regret and urgency, made my stomach turn. "Damon Frost," I repeated, the name sounding alien yet ominous. Before I could demand more details, Quillen's phone buzzed, pulling his attention away. He glanced at it briefly and then excused himself with an apology, leaving me alone with my swirling thoughts and a growing sense of dread that I tried to refocus on the present, on Marlo, on the night meant for enjoyment. But my mind was a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. Every laugh, every touch, every fleeting look from Marlo took on a sinister tone now. Was it possible that the woman I loved was orchestrating a deception right before my eyes? And if so, how deep did it run? I made my way toward the dance floor, my eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of Damon Frost. The name burned in my mind, a symbol of betrayal I couldn't ignore. As I pushed through the sea of bodies, I realized that the club's chaotic energy masked countless secrets, and mine was beginning to feel like the most dangerous of them all. I found a quiet spot near the bar, ordering a drink and trying to collect my thoughts. The taste of alcohol was bitter, matching the bitterness that was slowly taking root inside me. My eyes wandered, and then I saw them. A brief moment, almost like a reflection in a darkened mirror. Marlo was standing very close to someone I hadn't noticed before, her body language that of ease and familiarity. The person had an unmistakable swagger and a cold, calculating gaze. It was Damon Frost. My heart pounded as I watched from a distance, every instinct screaming to confront them both. Yet a part of me hesitated. I wanted to believe it was all a misunderstanding, a twisted game of shadows in a neon-lit room. But the evidence was mounting. Every whispered conversation, every secretive smile seemed to conspire against me. I left the bar, the weight of betrayal pressing heavily on my shoulders. The night was no longer about escaping routine. It had become a mission to uncover the truth behind Marlo's actions. I knew that confronting her or Damon in the midst of the club would only lead to more confusion. So I retreated to a quiet corner outside, where the cool night air could at least offer clarity. I sat on a bench under a flickering street lamp, replaying the events in my head. I wondered if I had been blind to the signs, if my trust had been misplaced in a woman I thought I knew so well, and in a friend I had trusted implicitly. The night stretched out before me, a dark canvas on which betrayal was being painted in strokes too vivid to ignore it in that moment. As I watched the city's lights blur into a mix of neon and shadows, I realized that nothing was as simple as it appeared. The seeds of betrayal had been sown not just in the club, but in every overlooked moment of the past. And somewhere in the maze of lies, the truth awaited, sharp, unyielding, and ready to reshape everything I had once believed. I knew that the journey to confront this betrayal would be fraught with twists and hidden dangers. There was a part of me that felt compelled to dig deeper, to uncover every hidden detail behind Marlo's actions and Quillen's sudden revelation. And though the sting of betrayal was fresh and raw, a darker part of me, one that had long been dormant, began to stir with thoughts of retribution. That night at Club Zyr wasn't just another night out. It was the night everything began to crumble, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing at the edge of a precipice, looking down into a void that promised only one thing: change. After leaving the pulsing chaos of Club Zyr, I couldn't shake the images from my mind. I trudged along darkened streets, the chill of the night doing little to cool the rising heat of betrayal. The revelation that Marlo had been seen sharing intimate moments with Damon Frost, or so Quillen had insisted, gnawed at me. Yet something in the way Quillen had hesitated, the furtiveness in his eyes, left me with an unsettling uncertainty. I needed answers. I returned home in a state of restless agitation. The apartment, once a sanctuary, now seemed a confining cell where every corner whispered doubts. Marlo was absent, and the silence of the place was deafening. I began methodically retracing the night's events. I scoured my memory. The glint in Quillen's eyes, his measured tone as he revealed what he'd seen, and then the fleeting glimpse of Damon Frost alongside Marlo. The puzzle pieces didn't quite fit together. Quillen, my oldest friend, had always been an open book. At least that was what I believed. Now, his secretive demeanor left me questioning everything. Determined to find clarity, I decided to call Quillen. His name flashed on my phone with an unfamiliar number. My fingers hesitated before pressing call. The voice that answered was soft, almost apologetic. "Darien? I'm glad you called." It was Quillen, but his tone was markedly subdued compared to the booming laughter I recalled from the club. "Quillen, we need to talk," I said directly. "Last night, what did you see? I need to know the truth." There was a pause, a pregnant silence that stretched into an eternity. Finally, he sighed. "Darien, I owe you more than just a passing remark. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you, but things got more complicated than I expected." My mind raced. Complicated? "Quillen, what are you saying?" He confessed in a low voice. "It wasn't just Damon Frost. I've seen more than one side of the story. There's a part of this night that I kept hidden, fearing it might shatter everything you believed in." His voice trembled, and I could sense that this conversation was turning into a tipping point. I pressed him on. Quillen, you're my friend. Don't hold back. Who was Marlowe with, really? He hesitated, and then, in a rush of reluctant words, admitted, Darien, it wasn't Damon Frost the entire time. I saw Marlowe with him, yes, but it wasn't just a chance encounter. Damon was there as a distraction. There was a palpable tension in his tone, like he was wrestling with a burden too heavy to share. Before I could ask for further clarification, Quillen continued, I'm sorry, Darien. There's something you need to know about me, too. The confession hit me like a punch. What do you mean, Quillen? I demanded, my voice cracking under the weight of the implications. I've been involved in things I'm not proud of, things I kept hidden even from you, he said quietly. Last night, I was with Marlowe, more than just a friend. I had a part in that scene, and Damon Frost was there to cover it up. He's not who you think he is. My head spun. All along, I had assumed the betrayal was solely between Marlowe and some mysterious outsider. Now it appeared that the betrayal was much closer to home. Quillen, my best friend, was entwined in this sordid affair. Quillen, are you telling me you were the one she was with? I demanded, feeling a mixture of disbelief and betrayal twist inside me. Yes, he whispered. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. I thought I could have it both ways. I was there to be her confidant, her secret, but then Damon Frost arrived, and I let things spiral out of control. His words tumbled out, a cascade of guilt and regret. I tried to mask it, thinking I'd protect you from the pain of the truth, but I see now that my silence only deepened the wound. I was silent for a long moment. The raw sting of betrayal from both Marlowe and Quillen was a double blow, one that threatened to shatter the foundations of everything I'd held dear. Why? Was all I could manage. Why did you both do this? Quillen's response was a murmur. I can't justify it, Darien. I was weak. I got caught up in the thrill of forbidden pleasure, and before I knew it, I was in too deep. I never intended to hurt you. His words, meant to placate, only served to intensify my anguish. I ended the call abruptly, the conversation leaving a bitter residue in my heart. Now, my anger wasn't solely aimed at Marlowe. The betrayal had become personal. Two people I trusted had conspired in deceiving me. In that moment, a dark determination took root. I wouldn't let this treachery go unanswered. I needed to find every piece of the puzzle, to understand the extent of their deception and to decide on my next move. The next few days were a blur of sleepless nights and feverish planning. I dove into the details of my marriage, revisiting memories that had once been a source of comfort, but now felt like traps laden with deceit. Every laugh shared, every whispered conversation with Marlowe, took on a sinister edge. I began compiling evidence, text messages, photos from social media, even the peculiar timing of Marlowe's phone calls, and every scrap of information added a new dimension to the betrayal point. One evening, as I rummaged through old emails in search of clues, I stumbled upon a cryptic message from Marlowe addressed to someone with the handle Q. The message was vague, full of double entendres and coded language. My heart sank as I realized that Q was almost certainly a reference to Quillen. It wasn't just a matter of one night out at a club. This was a carefully orchestrated affair that had been in the works for a long time. The evidence confirmed my worst fears. Marlowe and Quillen had been planning this behind my back. The sting of betrayal was magnified by the fact that my two closest confidants had conspired in this act of treachery. I began to map out a timeline, piecing together moments from our shared past that now appeared tainted with deception. In the midst of my investigation, I received an anonymous note slipped under my door. The note was brief, written in a hurried scrawl. Not everything is as it seems. Look deeper. I couldn't help but wonder if someone was watching, if there was more to the story than the straightforward betrayal I had assumed. The note hinted at hidden motives and layers of deceit that I had not yet uncovered. I spent hours analyzing every detail, every clue that might lead me to the full picture. The revelation that my best friend had been complicit was devastating, but the anonymous tip suggested that there was a deeper game at play. Was this a warning from someone on the inside, or a taunt from one of the conspirators? The ambiguity only fueled my resolve to unearth the truth at night. Sleep eluded me as I wrestled with conflicting emotions. Anger, sorrow, and a growing thirst for revenge. The betrayal had altered everything. I wasn't just a victim. I was now a man armed with the knowledge of deception and determined to turn the tables. I decided that my next step would be to confront Marlowe. But not in the heat of an angry outburst. Not in the public glare of a nightclub. I planned a meeting in a neutral, controlled environment. A quiet cafe, far removed from the shadows of our past. I needed to see her face to face, to hear her explanations, and to gauge the sincerity of her remorse. The confrontation would be a calculated step in my quest for the truth. As I prepared for the encounter, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being drawn into a labyrinth with no clear exit. Every revelation led to new questions, and every clue hinted at deeper layers of betrayal. And lurking in the background was the mysterious note, an enigma that promised further twists to be why the end of those restless days, my course was set. I had been betrayed by the two people I trusted most, and now I was determined to reclaim my power. I wouldn't allow their lies to define me or dictate the course of my life. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The time for retribution was coming, and I intended to be the one holding all the cards. I set the meeting for early afternoon at a quiet, almost forgotten cafe on the edge of downtown. The city's pulse had slowed by then, and the subdued hum of conversations provided a backdrop for what I hoped would be a revealing exchange. I arrived a few minutes early and chose a table near the window, where the soft natural light could mask the harshness of my emotions. Every detail of that day, the slightly overcast sky, the muted chatter of the other patrons, even the aroma of freshly ground coffee, seemed to conspire to make the confrontation as inevitable as it was uncomfortable. Marlowe arrived shortly thereafter. She wore a light trench coat, and her eyes darted nervously as she approached the table. "Darien," she greeted, her voice low and cautious. Her tone carried a mixture of regret and apprehension, as if she were bracing herself for the inevitable questions. I nodded in greeting, my face unreadable, and motioned for her to sit. For a few long moments, neither of us spoke. The silence was heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. Finally, I broke it. "I need to understand what happened, Marlowe. Last night, everything changed." My words were blunt. Stripped of any attempt at diplomacy, her eyes shifted downward, and for a moment I thought I saw the flicker of remorse cross her face. "Darien, I never intended for you to be hurt like this. I made a mistake, and I've been trying to figure out how to explain it all." Her voice wavered, and I could sense that she was struggling to find words that might justify or at least make sense of the betrayal. I leaned forward, keeping my tone even. "Then explain it to me. How did it come to this? How did you end up with Quillen, and with Damon?" I asked, letting the names hang in the air like accusations. Marlowe exhaled slowly. "It's not as simple as you think. Things had been unraveling for a while. I felt trapped in a life that was too predictable, too stifling. I started seeking something different, something that made me feel alive." She hesitated, then added, "Quillen was there, and I thought maybe he could understand that. But then Damon appeared, offering a thrill I'd never experienced before." Her voice was quiet, almost apologetic, and I could detect the irony in her tone. The thrill of rebellion that had come at a high personal cost. Her confession was not the explanation I had hoped for, nor did it ease the sting of betrayal. Instead, it opened up a labyrinth of questions. "So you chose this chaos over our life together?" I asked, my voice calm yet laced with bitterness. "What about everything we built?" Tears welled in her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away, her gaze shifting away from mine. "I didn't plan it, Darien. I got lost along the way. I was trying to find myself, but I ended up hurting the one person who loved me." The words rang hollow in the stillness of the cafe, their sentiment unable to mend the fractures already present. I studied her face, trying to reconcile the woman I once loved with the one before me now. A woman driven by impulses I couldn't comprehend. Despite her remorse, I couldn't shake the sense that there was more to the story, a hidden motive or an unspoken secret that still lurked behind her eyes. Before I could press further, my phone buzzed with another anonymous message. Truths are never simple. Look where your trust leads. The message jolted me, reinforcing my suspicion that the betrayal was part of a larger, more twisted design. Was it a warning? A challenge? I closed my eyes for a moment, the weight of her confession and the cryptic note pressing down on me. I realized that this meeting was only a piece of a much larger puzzle. With every answer she offered, more questions arose. And as I looked at Marlowe, broken yet defiant, I knew that understanding the full extent of her betrayal was only the first step toward the reckoning I was destined to enact in the days after the cafe confrontation. I knew that answers lay buried beneath layers of deception. The anonymous note and the fragments of evidence had convinced me that Marlowe and Quillen's betrayal was only a part of something much larger. I decided to follow the paper trail, every phone call, every whispered secret, every coded transaction, to expose the network that had used me as a pawn. Late one afternoon, while sifting through old emails and bank statements, an email from talondrake@shadowmail.com caught my attention. The subject line read, "Truth Beyond the Veil." With some hesitation, I opened the email. Inside were several scanned documents, photos, and financial records that I hadn't expected. The documents detailed suspicious transfers between offshore accounts linked to a Marlowe Sinclair, and included images of covert meetings at nondescript locations. One photo showed Marlowe and Quillen in a heated discussion with a man marked by a silver tattoo of intertwined serpents on his wrist, labeled as D. Frost. As I reviewed the evidence, my suspicion deepened. This wasn't merely about an extramarital affair. It was a well-organized scheme. Marlowe and Quillen appeared to be part of a larger operation, one that involved money laundering for an underground syndicate. Damon Frost, far from being a simple dalliance, was an operative in this criminal network. Their betrayal had served as a diversion, allowing them to conduct transactions and meetings without drawing attention. I spent the next couple of days piecing together the timeline. Every encounter, every misdirected phone call, now took on a more sinister tone. I revisited the cafe where I'd met Marlowe, retraced the steps from the club, and even re-examined financial statements from my own records. Slowly, a pattern emerged. Clandestine meetings, suspicious transfers, and coded messages, all pointing to an elaborate scheme that exploited my personal life for a more significant criminal enterprise. Then, another message arrived from Talondrake, a text with a single instruction. Meet me at the abandoned Greenridge train station. Midnight. The urgency in the message left no room for refusal. Despite the risk, I knew that this meeting might reveal the final pieces of the puzzle at midnight. I arrived at Greenridge train station, its deserted platforms and flickering lights setting a grim stage. The building's decay reflected the crumbling trust in my life. I waited in the shadows until a figure emerged from behind a broken bench. The man, dressed in a dark hoodie, spoke in a low, steady tone. "Darien Kestrel?" he asked, confirming my identity before introducing himself as Talondrake. Talon didn't waste time. He explained that he worked with a group dedicated to exposing corruption within underground networks. He had been monitoring the transactions and covert meetings involving Marlowe, Quillen, and Damon Frost. According to Talon, the money laundering operation was only a part of a broader plan. The funds funneled through these transactions were earmarked for an even larger operation, one that could destabilize key infrastructures in our city. He showed me evidence on his tablet. Surveillance footage taken from the club, a discreet meeting room, and even an external shot of my apartment building on the night of the betrayal. In the footage, I saw Marlowe and Quillen exchanging envelopes with Damon Frost and another unidentified associate. The recorded transactions, the meeting spots, and the timing of the exchanges all pointed to a carefully planned criminal enterprise that used our personal connections as cover. The more Talon revealed, the more I realized how deep the conspiracy ran. My marriage, once my safe haven, had been exploited as a front for a dangerous network. Marlowe had not only betrayed me on a personal level, but she had also compromised the trust and stability of an entire system by aiding this syndicate. Armed with this new evidence, I began to develop a plan. I started reaching out to a few contacts who had connections in law enforcement and the financial sector. Their expertise, combined with the hard evidence provided by Talon, could help me dismantle the network from within. I meticulously recorded every detail of Talon's information and began mapping the connections between the offshore accounts, coded transactions, and the network's key players. Even as I worked, a sense of cold determination replaced the lingering shock and anger. I was no longer just a victim of personal betrayal. I was now a man on a mission to expose and stop a criminal operation that had used my life as collateral. Every piece of evidence, every recorded conversation, added another layer of resolve to my plan. Standing in front of a dusty window in my study that night, I reflected on how everything had shifted. My trust had been exploited, my personal life used as a smokescreen for criminal activities. But I was not defeated. Instead, I felt the stirrings of a calculated retribution that extended far beyond my personal vendetta. I would ensure that Marlowe, Quillen, and their dangerous associates would face the consequences of their actions. That I closed the door on that chapter of betrayal and stepped into a new role. A man armed with evidence, determination, and the will to bring down a network that had thought itself untouchable. The final act of reckoning came one rainy night. I had gathered every shred of evidence, every damning record, and coordinated with trusted contacts. Marlowe, Quillen, and Damon Frost believed themselves untouchable until now. At a private meeting arranged by my allies in law enforcement and financial oversight, the web of their deceit was laid bare in a sterile conference room. I watched as my contacts presented the evidence. Offshore bank transfers, surveillance footage, and intercepted communications. Each document dismantled the facade they had so carefully built. Marlowe's secret meetings, Quillen's involvement, and Damon's ties to the criminal network were exposed to a room of stern-faced investigators. As the authorities closed in, my heart pounded with a mix of cold resolve and grim satisfaction. The betrayal that had shattered my world was now the instrument of their downfall. They had manipulated trust and exploited personal connections for their gain, but no longer. With the final pieces in place, legal indictments were issued, and a full-scale investigation ensued. I recalled every moment of deceit. The twisted smiles at Club Zyr, the whispered conspiracies behind closed doors, and realized that their treachery had not only betrayed me but endangered countless others. The downfall of their network would serve as both retribution and a warning to those who might follow in their footsteps. In that decisive moment, I reclaimed my dignity. The sting of betrayal was replaced by the knowledge that justice, though slow, had been served. As I left the meeting, the rain washed away the remnants of my past life, and I stepped into the future. A future defined not by the wounds of betrayal, but by the strength to rebuild and the resolve to ensure that trust, once broken, could be transformed into a foundation for truth. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed this journey, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories like this one. Got thoughts or experiences you'd like to share? Drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.